Hi, and welcome to another episode of You Haven't Seen What? A couple's quest to rectify the wrongs of their partner never seeing culturally relevant movies. I'm Joelle.
I'm Parry.
All right, I didn't say we were married.
I noticed that. I was going to comment. I was going to say, is there something you're not telling me?
I don't know. Maybe it's something subconscious.
Oh, yikes.
Maybe it has to do with all these dreams that I'm having since we watched this movie.
Oh, really now?
Yeah, it's very possible.
Have you been having 50 Shades of Mickey Rourke?
No, definitely not. I mean, younger Mickey Rourke, maybe.
Oh, yeah. Young Mickey Rourke is pretty hot.
Yeah, he is pretty hot. So, yeah.
I can't argue with that.
Exactly.
Not the wrestler era Mickey Rourke. Or
no, he had too much
Iron
plastic
Man
surgery
2, but
by then.
Mm-hmm.
It's bad.
Yes.
Yeah, I shouldn't do all those things to your face. Nope, shouldn't do all
Well,
those
he
things
also was a boxer. So that does something to your face in many cases if you take enough hits.
Yes, that does it too.
So I don't know if that says he wasn't a very good boxer because I haven't researched his career, but his face certainly
he
shows.
wasn't a bad boxer. He was pretty good.
But I mean, I know like Muhammad Ali, he did suffer effects from boxing, but he never looked like he had been pummeled like Rourke has.
Wow.
And a number of other boxers who look like they really took a lot of hits.
I mean, we're literally in minute two, and it's already getting ugly up in here. So hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of You Haven't Seen What? And yeah, it's Joelle and Parry. We're still married. We are, I don't know. We're still married.
Yep.
Watched 9.5 weeks.
I don't know you. You really don't know me.
I can't figure this guy out.
You can ask me to leave.
I don't want you to leave.
Does this excite you?
Yes. I think I've been hypnotized.
But I never felt anything like this before.
How did you know I'd respond to you the way I have?
I saw myself in you.
Mickey Rourke, Kim Basinger, 9.5 weeks.
And Parry had never seen it.
I had not.
Listen, what happened to your adolescenthood? How old were you when this came out? This came out in 86. How old were you in 86 when this came out?
13.
Yeah. What the fuck is wrong with you?
Well, as I've said before that my friends
You're like 14.
Yeah. And my friends and I were watching like Aliens in the dark.
We better get back, because it'll be dark soon, and they mostly come at night. Mostly.
And trying to scare each other as opposed to trying to be like, oh, let's watch this arousing movie.
Okay, but at some point you went to college, right? And this was still pretty like racy back then.
Yes, but VHS porn was pretty prevalent at that point, so I had no problem. No, I'm kidding.
I mean, are you? Wow.
Well, at that point, a lot of movies had copied this or used similar sequences.
What movies? Similar sequences back when you were 18.
What I mean is that if I were looking for, at that age, not being as sophisticated a film goer, if you were just looking for nudity, it was pretty readily available.
All right, that's fair. All right, I guess. I don't know. I think, well, we can sort of talk about this a little bit later, but I definitely think Adrian Lynch's films appeal more to women than they do to men. I think the whole soft porn category that Zalman King fits in really does appeal more to women, and we could talk a little bit more about him too, like sort his writing.
The bodice ripper romance novel element of this, you mean? Or
some of it, like the struggle between being a woman, being possessed physically, wanting to be possessed physically. Like wanting to submit, not to submit, the whole struggle behind all of that, as well as the desire to be courted and romanced by, this dangerous guy.
Right.
Type thing.
Certainly the excitement.
Or forbidden moment, right?
Right. The excitement of the bad boy. As we've talked about on this podcast before, is that the bad boy is always very exciting. You may not want to eventually marry the guy.
It's not just the bad boy. It's not just the bad boy. It's the stranger.
Mm.
Would you ever let your lover see the stranger in yourself?
It's not just the bad boy, I think. It is also the stranger, the emotional, which then makes for very, very bad decisions later on in relationships, quite honestly, is this person who is emotionally disconnected and wanting that emotionally disconnected person.
Right.
So,
Someone who
so it's
is
interesting.
who is you are equally, someone is lusting you and you are equally lusting after them, and the connection is
Yeah, like the
purely
physical
physical.
connection's there, and you're hoping that they're going to have an emotional connection or response, but they really can't. Like they're incapable of having that, or incapable of having it with you.
And that is why this type of relationship usually ends in disaster, is because those people are not often capable of transitioning into a more emotionally based relationship.
Yeah, welcome to the film summary of 9.5 Weeks,
Yeah.
kind of, sort of.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I had to have the synopsis ready for us for this one. So I have: the cyclical nature of John and Elizabeth's relationship of fighting and sex brings BDSM out of the dark and into mainstream culture.
And food play.
Oh my God. Okay, yeah, and full pay. Jesus. I have so many issues with that.
We'll get there.
Anyway, yeah, so I guess watching it for the first time, what did you think about 9.5 Weeks? Or are there any scenes that were really memorable to you, or that you decided were memorable to you? And try to be nice first, and then we can not be not so nice later.
Well, you witnessed my initial reaction as we watched this on a laptop in a hotel room.
Yeah, you were like, what the fuck?
Well, it was more at certain scenes like, what is happening right now? I don't understand sex and sewer water. But but I will say that given a few days to really process it and think about it, I've come to a little different place with it. It has settled into my mind a little bit. My initial reaction was shocking, not because of the sex or because of the emotional manipulation or any of those things. It was more just the way some scenes jarred me and bugged me, but
it's supposed to be unsettling.
It is. Although I think the honey was supposed to be sexy, and to me, when he covers her in honey, it just seemed more like an OCD nightmare to me.
Yes, to which you are OCD.
But I mean,
and I'm OCD too. I was like, that is too sticky. That is a freaking mess.
Well, it's also a friction killer.
That's
I feel like it's like having sex on the beach, that it sounds really romantic and great, but when you really think about the
sand
logistics,
is everywhere.
exactly,
Sand is everywhere. It's a bad idea.
There are a lot of
folks. Don't do
problems
it.
with that in reality, but I know that
It's not sexy at all.
But I know that this is a fantasy, and that maybe some of it is meant to be taken more in that manner of, okay, the actual reality of this moment might not actually be that great if you try it at home, but on a big screen between two very attractive people, it might seem really sexy, and
how many people do you think
instill something in you
tried honey?
A lot of people.
A lot of people, right?
The fact that this introduced food play, I think, to mainstream America, a lot of people went home, sat in their open refrigerators, and started feeding what was in the fridge to each other.
And that ended poorly.
Yeah.
I feel like that did not end up well for most people.
I'd like to see if, electric bills across the country went up the months after this was released, because she sits in that fridge a long time, and I think they wasted a lot of
jalapeno
energy.
should not be in foreplay. or food play.
I would wholeheartedly agree.
That's a bad idea.
Having lived in Albuquerque, I have seen things with hot peppers, end badly, and I'm not talking about anything sexual. I'm just talking about at an average meal.
Oh, jeez. All right. So aside from the food play, anything else sort of like pique your interest?
I'm intrigued, and I really want to examine this a little bit more, is Lynn's fascination with women and men's clothing. I thought that the fact that he did a similar thing in Flashdance was it's just interesting. That's kind of like a thing he likes.
Well, that's actually a part that was written into the memoir. So,
okay.
Yeah, for those who don't know, this is actually based on a book called 9.5 Weeks, A Memoir of a Love Affair, which was written by Ingeborg Day, and her nom de plume at the time was Elizabeth McNeil.
Which is how it's listed in IMDb, is under the...
Elizabeth McNeil, yeah. And it was published in 1978. And she's very interesting in and of herself, I think. She has a lot of different sides to her. I think the duality of going through this and where she ended up at the end of this tryst was more like in a mental hospital, never to be seen again from this guy. But I think what we have to remember is that the overarching themes and pieces that were in the film are also in the book, and the book is actually written on a real experience that she had with somebody on having an affair. So she would be great and composed by day, and then basically be like a sex slave by night, in a very codependent relationship. So that she really deemed as torturous.
And apparently the book is much darker. And the film originally had some of those darker elements, but they were removed because test audiences did not react well, and producers of the film and, the money people and everyone just had real problems with some of that. But in the end, the fact that in the book she ends up in an institution, she's hospitalized because of the psychological abuse she's been put through, I like if some of that, I would have liked, if some of that element had been kept, because I feel like by removing some of the darker elements, maybe, and focusing a little more on the softcore, it removes some of the potential message of the film, which is the danger of getting into this type of a relationship. As fun as it can be, I feel like there is
Whoa. Hold. I don't necessarily agree with you. I really don't necessarily agree with you. I think that, funny enough, I think that's what 50 Shades, it's sort of like, so 50 Shades was definitely influenced by this.
Right down to the guy's name.
Yeah, basically. So
it's Mr. Gray in both cases.
Exactly.
Spelled the same.
It's not spelled the same.
Is it
not? One's EY, one's AY.
Oh, I thought it was. Okay. Sorry.
So, but yeah, one is Chris, one is John. So yes, it was definitely influenced. I think 50 Shades of Grey, love it, hate it, whatever you want. The 50 Shades of Grey actually does come from a line within 9.5 Weeks, where they're talking about sunglasses, and she said 50 Shades of Grey. So it actually does come from a line.
Not the part where he says
50 seconds.
I'll count to 50.
Whatever.
Shades of Grey.
That's another one. So it's definitely influenced from there. There are very similar things and mechanisms which are popular in BDSM, which are used in both. And so 50 Shades sort of talks about if you were to put yourself within a contract and this is what you decided willingly to do, and here are the terms of the contract, and it sort of gives you a little bit more of a stepping stone of what would that maybe BDS relationship look like. That's not to say that people, if you're psychologically prone to having a breakdown, right, or if you have already psychological issues, yes, being within a relationship where you are the submissive all of the time, or opting to take that role, right, because you're taking that role no matter what you want to talk about it. The relationship that they had was consensual in terms of she kept coming back and inviting him over and doing all of those things. Whether or not all of those elements are shown within this film is different, but
right, because they never come to any type of agreement or have a conversation about it, about what they like in it. He is creating this atmosphere and she is going along with it until toward the end she seems to start taking her power back. But
until she's not.
In 50 Shades, it seems like she was like, okay, in the 21st century, this is not going to go over as well, so maybe this needs to be a little more like contractual and agreed upon.
Right, or there's this whole thing. So to go ahead and say that all BDSMs or the monopoly or the play within might be psychologically disturbing, that's what I take exception to. I don't want to judge people for being in a BDSM relationship.
No, not at all.
And I don't think you were trying to. I just think it maybe came off as if you were saying something towards that.
I was saying in a relationship where someone is being manipulative and keeps upping the stakes, as in this film, where he keeps.
But that's in any relationship, you up the stakes.
Yes.
I think this film does a poor job of sort of, and this is, this is really a production part, right? They wanted to feel this strain and this tension and to have these conversations. I don't really think that none of them made this film not to have a conversation about it, right? I think it is supposed to be controversial in its inherent nature.
Definitely.
And to look at things either from what we consider the sexual norm or relationship norm, and then have a conversation about it.
And of course, they're all consenting adults. I think it's just what the book, which I have not read, but what the description seems to discuss is the psychological damage that was done to her along the way. And because, not that she wasn't a willing participant, but I think she got to the point where she had no more power. And they do shift that a bit with the film.
No, so excerpts are that she likes it. So I think there's a, do you lose yourself within a relationship? And is that, sometimes from narcissistic behavior? Is that from being involved in something that you're not really comfortable with or you haven't been comfortable with? Is it a power struggle within a relationship? So there can be many reasons. Are you prone to that power relationship? Have there been other things in your life that then trigger all of these pieces? So we don't really know.
Right.
We don't really know. And there are excerpts in the book in which she is enjoying it immensely. So it's very challenging, right? So we always talk about consent is consent only within the present moment.
Right, because throughout, it's, she's enjoying it until she isn't.
Yeah. I mean, which is a great segue to favorite quotes, because my quote's directly related.
All right.
And it's really the last Kim Basinger line. It would be over when one of us said stop, but you wouldn't say it. And I almost waited too long. So, but I think that's true of any toxic relationship, really. So often we don't want to say it's over until something really blows up.
And I do think that was the moment where I'm glad it was there, because it is her taking her life back. And then he is left wanting. He is the one who is saying, after she leaves, I love you, come back. And he wasn't able to say that before, so it shows his emotional vulnerability and her saying, no, I can't be a part of this. And so I did appreciate that was a part of this. One of the quotes I picked, which is not mine, but because so many of the pieces seemed a little nonsensical in the film, there were so many just crazy little sections in there that I pulled out the line, my uncle died watching TV, because what does that line even mean? Although what I've come to realize is I think it's that she's awkward and nervous around him, and she says sometimes some dumb things around him.
So that's not your quote, but you decided to put it in here?
No, I thought it was an interesting piece of dialogue in there once I really started to think about it. But I think the real line of the whole movie, because...
Thank you for finally getting to that point.
Well, you're welcome. I think it's because I think it's the sexiest line in the whole film. Is when Rourke says, you don't ever have to do the dishes. I'll do the dishes.
That's because you do the dishes. So ridiculous.
That was the moment that I said, yes, this is pretty sexy.
You're fucking ridiculous. You do the dishes most of the time. Idiot.
Well, and the look on her face when he says he'll do the dishes is, she seems to really appreciate that.
Yeah, 80s women. I don't know what to tell you. Sometimes I love them. Sometimes I roll my eyes.
My question is, though, who had to clean up the whole floor after the food play sequence? And
if you busted out the honey, you would have to clean it up. That has to be the rule.
Well, that's why I think they did that at her place, because you notice his place was like super clean and pristine. So I don't think he was down for doing the food stuff at his place.
I don't think so either. No, that's a lot of mess. That's really messy. Like milk and champagne and honey and you're sitting in that.
And the milk and champagne was very suggestive in the way he's spraying it in her face, and she's pouring it all over her face, and it was a bit over the top suggestive, I think.
Oh, yeah, we didn't give a warning. Warning! Just in case you're not comfortable talking about BDSM or
Sex in general.
sex in general, you should not listen to this podcast.
And
Thanks.
coming up in a little bit, we are going to be discussing a little bit of, talking a little bit about rape. And so if that is something that is uncomfortable, you may want to skip over that part.
How about we're talking about consent? How about that we're talking
The
about
idea
that?
of consent, yes.
Yeah, the idea of consent. And so I think that's a well shift into good, bad, and ugly.
Mm-hmm. Very nice.
All right, not bad. I remembered at least this time. You always like bait me into going into the next section and then I don't say it or I don't do it.
I am being completely under your control today, so
These are lies. These are all lies.
dominate me.
So be careful what you wish for. So
Ah.
you're good. Good. What is your good?
My good was the look of the film. I really liked the style. I liked the light shafts coming out everywhere, like in her kitchen, and when she's touching herself in front of the projector, when she's looking at the slides. There was some amazing light in that sequence. Even in the crazy alleyway sex scene, the lighting is beautiful, even if it kind of looks like a scene from Batman.
Stop the press. Who is that?
But it throughout, I really
Pre-Batman, so it can't look like a scene from Batman.
Okay.
Batman can look like a scene from this.
perhaps,
Yes.
though not the same cinematographer. But the cinematographer did do some interesting stuff, like Life of Brian, Monty Python's, and Time Bandits, and Pink Floyd's The Wall. So that is Peter Bizio. Anything I've ever seen from him, I've enjoyed the look of, and this was no
Bizio?
exception. Is it busy? There's an
Bizio?
extra I in there, so it's Biziou. Bizio.
Bizio.
Bizio?
Bizio. Oui, oui. Mon chéri.
Yes.
Comment allez-vous? You're so ridiculous.
Je m'appelle
Je m'appelle
Parry.
Parry. Et vous?
Oui.
Who took French here? Who took French here?
Donde está el
Different language. Different language.
No, I'm thinking of the Flight of the Conchords, yes, where he is just repeating what is always on those French language tapes from the 80s and 90s, and that's all he knows how to say is, like, where is the discotheque?
Parlez-vous le français?
No.
That's about what I remember, unfortunately, of my French class.
Oh, boy. All right. So you're done with your good, right?
Yes.
Okay, good. My good was the idea of the mainstreaming of alternative sides of sex and actually addressing those alternative sides of sex. It's not like they didn't exist, right? It just really wasn't mainstream. So now all of a sudden, this film has pushed something else out into the forefront. And really, if you think about it, and you think about women's lib and the idea of women having the vote and women's liberation and women entering the workforce and all of those pieces, this really is just another side of being able to have those desires, feeling like they're okay, and taking that to a different level. So in an interesting way, this pushes it a little bit more into the mainstream, into other people's consciousness where it might not have been before. So
yeah, she's definitely liberated in that she can have sex with whoever she wants, whenever she wants, wherever she wants, and she does. And that transformation she goes through from being a more repressed person who has been married, has never had sex, but is awakened to a new side of herself. And though it takes her some time to get there, and, she shies away at the beginning, and Kim Basinger, though I don't always like her acting style, is perfect for this because she does have sort of a childlike aspect to her. And so when she starts off very shy and talking about these things, like when her artist friends are talking about the guy who shoves a paintbrush up his ass and paints that way, you can see she's blushing, and she finds it hard to tell the story herself, so someone else does. And the fact that she awakens to this and everyone is okay with this. It's not like, women shouldn't be doing this. It is very modern in that respect. That this type of sexual relationship or the sex part is okay.
Right. And she was 33 when she was filming this.
Yes.
So she was, a woman. Like, she was really not young or really manipulatable, I guess. Malleable.
And that's what the director wanted. Demi Moore actually auditioned for the role, but he said, you know what? You just look too young.
She was too young.
Yeah.
Like
you don't
20,
seem like someone
21.
who has been married once and been through it a bit to really carry that off. You just aren't there yet. But then, of course, she was cast in Indecent Proposal, also same director.
But later down.
Oh, much later down the road, yes.
Right. So you're bad. What's your bad?
My bad is that the kid never fully farts the theme to Jaws. I'm really expecting that to make a comeback somewhere later, and he just never comes through with it. So that was very disappointing.
J'ai pas entendu là.
Il a joué seulement la première mesure.
No, my real bad is actually more serious than that. It's something that you actually noticed as well at the beginning. We were both looking at this and we kind of turned to each other like, this is odd, is the beginning sequences, which are very Flashdance in that they're setting up sort of this city, America in decline almost, like these urban decay. It was, but the shots they're showing were they get progressively nicer as it goes more into the city, but at the start it's a little bit decayed looking, and it felt very Flashdance-y in those first couple of shots. But the people that populate all of those shots, other than Kim Basinger, are people of color, and they're all people doing sort of menial things or criminal activity. Like there's the one guy who has snatched someone's bag, and then there's like the lady out trying to get her dog to go to the bathroom in the cold, and he's not doing it, and they like do an extra shot of her. And there are the Hispanic garbage men, sanitation workers, if you will, who are sort of catcalling at her. And there are a couple more, but they're all like menial workers. And it just seemed like as it went along, we saw a few more of those people, and it felt like white people playing with a backdrop populated by struggling people of color. And so it just felt like white people at play a lot of the time against that backdrop. So I found that a little troubling.
Yeah, that was also the 80s.
Yeah.
I mean, that still continues, right? Even more. It's still prevalent. It's not prevalent. So, but the idea that there really wasn't a person of color that in the entire film.
No.
That had a real lead role or play.
Yeah.
So sadly, the 80s really sort of always harps on that piece.
And despite the fact that this film is largely populated with women, they do not pass the Bechdel test.
No, they do not pass the Bechdel. They're always talking about dudes, dude.
Except where they're, I think, talking about chicken at one point at the beginning, and and in the Chinese shop where the Chinese shop owner is shown as being a grumpy guy yelling at one of his customers. So another poor example of a person of color shown in the film.
Exactly. My bad was it's a little bit more lighthearted, and you've already alluded to this. I'm not having sex in street water. There are just some things that I will not do, and I think that has to really be one of them. I know it's rain sort of washing over them, but it's coming out of pipes, and it's coming into an alley down from a street, which means that it's now street water. It's not clean, and that's gross. And then you're gonna put your butt on that algae. I can't.
Like the streets
somebody
of New York.
has
Yikes.
if somebody has like thrown up, and now like that throw up is just going in your hair. Like it's just gross. It's really disgusting. I don't know who thought that looked sexy, but to me that was like my worst fucking nightmare like ever in life. Please, like why couldn't we have taken this to a shower? Why couldn't we have just been like, yeah, let's go somewhere else? Like, gross. I know it's about like doing something at that moment because it's enthralling, and they had just been through this, scene where they thought they were going to get beat up or they were going to die. And, she stabs some guy in the butt. And I really appreciate all of those things. And the adrenaline is just rushing and all those wonderful things. But the reality is, no one's having sex in that fucking alley unless you're getting paid to do it. All right. And those two are getting paid to do it. But for everybody else, if we have to make a choice, it's not going to be in some dirty, nasty alley with rainwater / street water washing over me. Definitely not a black woman with my damn hair. That's for damn sure. For sure. That was my bad. I was like, that's not real.
The idea of the water pouring down is sexy. Like if you're talking about a waterfall.
It is not sexy to a woman of color. It is just not sexy.
Not with the hair involved, especially. Not at all.
No. I feel like, mainstream Hollywood has this idea like, oh, this is going to be so great. This is not sexy. I don't want my hair getting messed up.
Again, back to that idea like with the food play of this may arouse feelings in one, but trying to duplicate the scene is not going to turn out well.
No. Not at all.
Although the ice, on the other hand, that is pretty hot, and that is workable in a very real sense.
Ice? There are problems with ice too, but it's not workable.
Depends on how you use it.
Yeah,
certainly.
there are definitely problems with ice, but it's more doable because there's not really, not a mess, and it's generally filtered water that's happening. So my OCD is not as bad about that, but yeah, anyway. So it's not as bad. And that scene is definitely hotter. Because it's cleaner. Wow, that really says a lot about me.
Although
it's cleaner, so it's hotter.
I'm with you.
So
I'm with you on this, though. I am
OCD.
completely 100% with you on the whole thing because those same scenes bothered me for the same reasons. So because I was thinking like, oh God, if we need to have a conversation about this.
What? Have a conversation about what?
About introducing honey. I think that just
Oh, if you and I need to have a conversation about introducing honey, there were just copious amounts. Like there was no control. It's like, let me pour this entire thing on you, and I feel like that is just cause for bad things. It's not like, oh, I've squirted a little dot, or I've done little dots, or it's like, no, I'm squirting the whole bottle on your body, wherever the hell I want.
Prematurely excited with the honey.
No, it was bad. That was bad. No. So you did your bad, right?
Yeah.
Yes. You're ugly.
Oh, well.
God, I think it's the same one.
Yeah.
Yeah, that heavy sigh. Ugh.
Yeah, you know what my ugly is.
I know. I think we need to just talk about consent, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
let's go from it from a stance of that, not that the scene was rapey. I think and to be fair, we might not have seen the correct cut or a good cut of it or any part of anything.
Well, apparently the European cut was longer in some of the sex scenes because they can better handle it, especially in the 80s. And apparently, though, there are something 20 hours of footage that Kim Basinger actually
14.
owns.
Yeah.
Because they were considered, what were the exact words, psychologically damaging that were considered just not showable in any way. And so, though Lynn has promised a director's cut that would have more scenes to it, including the one with the controversial pill scene, which we can talk about later, still, I wonder if there would be any better way if there was any footage in there that would make this scene better. Because to set the context for this scene, he basically left her home alone in his apartment all night and then calls her up and says, hey, have you been snooping around my place? And she admits to it. And he's like, oh, well, you've been basically you've been bad and I'm coming home to spank you. And he shows up and she's pissed off because he's left her alone all night. And then he proceeds to throw her down on a table and force himself on her. And she fights, but then seems to start enjoying it, but is simultaneously fighting it like she doesn't enjoy liking it.
Okay,
so it becomes sort of a psychological rape of, I don't like this, but I'm enjoying it. And so there were a lot of problematic elements to that.
But I almost feel like there's two problems, right? Number one, it was the idea of him doing it, right? So it's the idea that he's just like, well, I'm just going to go ahead and still possess you or take you however I want to, right? So that's problematic in and of itself. And then the other problem is that she doesn't ever actually say yes, or she doesn't ever actually verbally concede.
Right.
Even though she physically she does physically give consent.
She stops fighting as much, though she still she
No.
goes from sort of struggling to embracing.
She does fully go into embracing. I don't agree. Like it's a straight up rape scene. I don't feel like it's like that. I think that it's like we're having a fight, but instead of having a fight with words, we're now having a fight with our bodies, which is not really good either, right? So I see problems in the scene. I think what the bigger problem is that the example that it's showing. Yes. Right. So I don't have a problem with the scene per se. I have an example with the things that were left out and the example that it's setting. If that makes sense.
Because unfortunately, I think it taught a whole generation of men that this is how women like it, and that if you force it a bit, they're going to give in and enjoy it. But
so at the very beginning, okay, so here I'm gonna back it all the way the fuck up. Okay, so I'm gonna back it up to the beginning when they're on the houseboat, and if you've never listened to our podcast before, we don't ever really give you a full detailed summary. So if that's what you're expecting out of this, you're not getting it. We're assuming that you've seen this movie before, or if by listening to us that you'll go ahead and watch this movie. So one out of the two. But in the very beginning, right, when they're on his friend's houseboat. And she's like, I don't really, and he starts basically making up the bed as if they're going to have sex.
Yeah, he just starts putting she covers the bed with a sheet.
Okay, to be fair, to be fucking fair, she went along with him. She went with him. She went into this houseboat.
Yeah.
She kept going, right? So I'm not victim blaming, but I'm like, she wanted to go ahead and keep progressing it further. So he's just progressing it further. But when she says, I'm uncomfortable, I don't want to do this, they leave.
Yeah.
So to be fair, like I just want to like point out another piece.
It's not the first time that they've been together in a sexually charged situation. Yeah.
Right? And and they're in a sexual relationship that has a lot of I'm telling you what to do, and this is the relationship that we're having, right? So this sadomasochistic relationship where you are I'm your dominant and I'm your subservient, right? That is the relationship to which they are in. It's enjoyable for them that way. So that's why I don't have problems with the scenes per se, but I have problems with them not telling the full story of everything, because you're right. I think that it does get lost within that context. And if you're only taking that scene for just the scene, it's not going to work for you. You're going to get a different message.
Because we would hope that an audience could think beyond that, but unfortunately, sometimes people take those things at face value and they write what they want to into it. And it's followed not long after by a montage of them basically fighting and fucking repeatedly. That's their whole relationship. That
is their whole relationship.
It is.
That's what the relationship is based on.
Yeah.
It's based on sexual awakening and exposure and experimentation.
Right.
The entire relationship.
And I see where the after-fight sex can be exhilarating, and they are playing that up in it, but that is their whole relationship. So it connects back to this moment on the table that, because there's no explanation, it seems like that's what's happening repeatedly.
Right. Well, and I think the issue is, in especially within here, and even when we talk about 50 Shades of Grey, or generally when we talk about women in a lot of movies in general, is that, sex equates to love, and you're supposed to eventually love each other and share all these wonderful things together. And unfortunately, it does not always equate to love for a lot of different people, right? Not just men or women, but just in general. It doesn't necessarily equate those things, or people aren't capable of loving. So understanding that, and not, you just need to go to therapy. Understanding that and not really, and everyone should go to therapy really, and not really projecting what you want on the relationship and actually keeping those things separate is not a bad thing. Like your relationship should be what you want, but it's not always going to be how you want it or how you get it. It's two people deciding what they want that relationship to look like. So if something is sex, then it is sex, which I think that's how he initially wanted the relationship. What she wanted, I'm not quite so sure, because you don't really get a sense that she really knows what she wants. But she enters it in it that it's just sex, and then by the end it's like just an adventure, and she tries to treat it like just an adventure, and she's incapable of treating it like just an adventure. And in the end, it seems like he's incapable of treating it just like an adventure too. Right. So not that it always works out this way, but that's just sort of how this story actually ended.
Which is why one of the more intriguing scenes to me was when she talks about what's it like to be a man, and he sends her men's clothing and has her come to a restaurant dressed fully as a man with a mustache and everything.
Yeah, and that was in the book too. And
tries to talk about what although it makes it sound like, oh, a man's life is terrible unless he has a side piece, because that's basically what he says to her. Is the wife and the kids and the job that just goes on and on and on. But hey, I got this one on the side, which also sets something of a poor example. But the way the scene is set up at first is interesting. But I think that where this all comes around to is when he tries to introduce another person into their sexual relationship, which is, a sex worker. He brings
they're upping the game.
Mm-hmm. And she doesn't like it. And she goes running through old school Times Square and winds up in a sex shop. And
yeah, old school Times Square is really seedy.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It's super seedy.
So in our Jen Explain moment, Times Square was not always a mall outside. It used to be a really crappy, dirty, seedy place filled with sex shops and
prostitution, drugs everywhere. I mean, not that maybe those things don't exist and we're just not seeing them, but
it's just a very different place.
Out in the open. Like, you do not go to Times Square after dark.
Yeah, it used to be the place you did not go at 2 a.m. or even at 11 o'clock at night.
Yeah, pre-Giuliani.
Right. You and I have been out there at like 3 o'clock in the morning walking around, and there's just as many people out there as there are at 2.
Don't tell people lies. I'm not awake at 3 o'clock in the morning. You're not awake at 3 o'clock in the morning.
Okay, there was that one time we went wandering out, but I think we'd had a lot of sugar.
That's
or
possible.
Caffeine or something.
This is possible.
But she winds up at a live sex act show where 2 people are going at it on a stage, and there are a lot of men in trench coats standing watching, which anytime you're going to end up there in your relationship, it might be a problem, but it is.
No, it was just men.
But what she starts to do is when he comes in after her, she starts making out with another man and kind of turns the tables on him, and the look he gets, and where he looks down and looks back up, he's obviously very bothered by her doing to him what he does to her, but I think he's also a little bit excited by it, that she has taken that power in that moment. And at first that scene really tripped me out, and I was like, what the hell? But the more I thought about it, it was like, okay, she's having her moment here, and this leads to her going, you know what, I can't continue with this. I need to break this off here before it's too late. But the Mickey Rourke, for all his other issues in real life, he does have a great way of letting these expressions and moods pass across his beautiful face very quickly. And that is one of those moments. Across. Yeah. And that is one of those moments where it passes across.
Thank you.
So that moment I appreciated more as I thought about it.
Yeah, and really, to me, I think the film really is about the context of when it happened, and the fact that it really couldn't get released until '86 because they were trying to figure out a way to slice and dice the movie. And I know it's a little bit more of a production note, but to try to figure out how it's going to really work, in the context of the 80s and how it would make audiences feel. And in prude fashion, very prude fashion, the U.S. didn't love it. It was really the European releases that made money versus the U.S. releases.
Yes. Yep. In fact,
so do we actually want to head into production notes on that note?
Yeah, I have a note about that.
All right. So production notes produced by Mark Damon, Sidney Kimmel. Kimmel? Yeah. Zalman King, Anthony Rufus Isaacs. Screenplay by Sarah Koenig. Sarah Koenig. I'm butchering your name. I'm sorry. Zalman King. Patricia Louisiana Knopf, which was also Zalman King's wife, based on 9.5 Weeks.
Who just passed away.
A couple
days ago.
Based on the book, 9.5 Weeks, a memoir of a love affair, which we alluded to earlier. Music by Jack Nietzsche. Cinematography by Peter Bizet. Edited by Caroline Biggerstaff, Ed Hansen, Tom Rolfe, Mark Winsky. Sure.
Just Mark.
Mark.
Good old
Mark
Mark.
W.
We love you, Mark.
Distributed by MGM, and a release date of February 21st, running time of 117 minutes. I think that's the director's cut. Budget is $17 million. Box office, it raked in $100 million worldwide. So that's
because it didn't do well on its initial U.S. release.
Did not. 64% Rotten Tomatoes, 6 out of 10 IMDb, which I think is probably about accurate. I think it also just depends on when you've seen it. So I think if you've seen it truly before Basic Instinct, Eyes Wide Shut, that whole piece, then to me, before 50 Shades, it makes a lot of sense. If you've seen it post 50 Shades, I think it's much harder to grasp, and post all of those other movies, it's much harder to grasp because you're not really recognizing maybe how groundbreaking this actually was. And
how extremely risque it was and taboo.
Extremely. So, there's that.
Did you want to talk about the sequels at all?
No, there's two sequels that both went straight to video cassette, and it was another 9.5 Weeks and the first 9.5 Weeks. So a sequel and a prequel.
Yeah. Another 9.5 Weeks, also known as Love in Paris, where Rourke actually goes seeking out Elizabeth, but it's just her paintings that are there, and he falls in love with her assistant, and it goes on from there.
Great. Nobody watched that.
On video cassette?
Yeah, no one watched that shit. They're all still stuck in 9.5 Weeks, quite honestly. And there's a very big love for this movie. There's a very big love for this movie.
And I like I said, once I really thought about it, I understood a lot more why, not only if you saw it at that age, why it would have been very interesting for you, but also there's some real things to be said in here. I just don't always like the way they said it.
Oh, wait, can I read you an excerpt from the book since you don't like the way that they said it?
Yes.
And then maybe it'll give you an understanding of what it was coming from.
Yeah.
And this book was released, you have to remember, in 1978, so this is pretty risque for that. It is the scene where they're in the leather goods store, and he's picking out a riding crop for her.
Mm-hmm.
This one, I guess, he says. I look over at the counter. He's looking back at me. He's holding a riding crop. I'd like to try it out. I've become disoriented. I'm on alien territory in a foreign century. He walks a few steps to where I am, half sitting on the desk, one foot on the floor, the other dangling. He pulls up my skirt, up my left leg, which is resting on the desk, steps back, and strikes me across the inner thigh. The searing pain is an inextricable part of a wave of excitement. Every cell in my body is awash with lust. It is silent in the small, dusty room. The clerks behind the counter have frozen. He slowly smooths down my skirt and turns to the older man, who is wearing a suit and still looks like an accountant, though a deep flush is spreading upward from his shirt. This one will do.
What were you trying to tell me there?
What?
I mean, it's a good scene.
No, it's different from the actual scene.
Mm-hmm.
So it's different in terms of he does hit her lightly across the lap, but that the scene in which the author is depicting is way more erotic than it's sort of saying like, she's mine, I can do anything with her, she's willing to accept it, and it excites her in a very different way. While it is disorienting, she is enthralled by it at the same time. So,
and I realize in you saying that, I think the way they helped to make it more palatable for U.S. audiences was they played up the humor. Like that scene, they make it sort of funny where he smacks her with the horse crop and these two musty, dusty old guys working at the shop look shocked by this, by what's occurring. And so we get a little bit of a laugh out of it. He's sort of taking the piss out of these stuck-up old guys here. So I think that's how they sort of got around it. Same thing with the food. They played, what is the song? The Bread and Butter by Devo during that sequence, which seemed very jarring that they were making that funny instead of sexy, but
that was intentional.
Yes. Yeah. That he said he just couldn't get the feel for it until he put that music to it. But I think that's how they made it more palatable for the US audiences was through that. Through that humor.
Yeah, I mean there's fine lines, I think. So I think that's what 50 Shades doesn't do, right? There's just not a whole ton of humor. It's a whole lot of sexiness. And like BDSM play that's supposed to be sexy. So I don't know. I think there's two differences. I think there's definitely a more serious tone in the book that I kind of dig, because she's just exploring this. It's literally like, I'm reawakened. She was a divorcee at the time that she wrote the book, and there's a definite reawakening and a sexual exploration of who she's going to be, which was overwhelming for her, obviously. And I mean, I think the times really make it overwhelming as well. If you've never experienced anything like that the timing, or never encountered even visual representations of what that looks like in mainstream media, it would be overwhelming.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Well, they certainly enjoyed it in other countries, and I'm having trouble finding the exact note here, but there was a theater where it played for over a year and raked in a ton with how many people went to go see it there, and it played for I think 5 months at another theater, and so
because I think people felt like you did. Like the first time they saw it, they were like, "What the hell did I just watch?" And then it's sort of like you take somebody else with you, right? And you're sort of like, "All right, now, like, is it going to be different the second time around?" Like I think if you watched it the second time around, you might feel different about the entire thing.
Well, Lynn himself has said that people were like enraged by it when they first saw it, especially men, and just lost their mind. But then they would actually come back and he'd say, "I thought you hated it." And it'd say, "Yeah, but I'm trying to understand it." And so, yeah, I think that is one skill that he really has, is he has an ability to bother you in such a way that you want to understand why you're bothered by something, and maybe excited by it, and maybe confused by it. And that, at least it made me feel something. And that is something that a lot of films are incapable of. And so I give it a lot of credit, not only for confusing me at first, because a lot of films either are exciting or boring or whatever, but confused and then churned in my head for a while until I could kind of come to a different place with it. And I do appreciate that quite a bit, even if I still don't love the film as an overall product.
Yeah, no, and I think that's what he then chooses to continuously go ahead and actually make, are things that are jarring, like Basic Instinct, like Lolita. Mm-hmm. What else does he do? Indecent Proposal. Mm-hmm. So things that you're just sort of look at it and you're like, I can't even take this at face value. I have to decide whether or not this aligns with what I believe in or not what I believe in. Can this truly happen? I think, quite honestly, Flashdance was way more innocent and not innocent at the same time. Mm-hmm. There was definitely a duality, but it wasn't so deep to me. I mean, really, one is that she's an exotic dancer, and then she's, a welder, and she's saving up all her pennies. Like, all right, fine. I go ahead and I give her all of that. But yeah.
It's definitely, what we would define as art is something that we may not like it, but it provokes a reaction. And that is, it has its own merit.
Yep. What else do you got?
Well, I was going to say that in that same vein, though, one thing that I think if I'm going to do a script doctor scene other than the one we did about the table, I feel like when she's dressed up as a man, had they alluded somehow to the repressed emotions of men and the expectations that men put upon themselves and on each other and the toxic masculinity that comes out of that, I feel like that sequence would have been elevated too had there been more of a conversation. I know it was the 80s, but I feel like if they were to do that now, it was alluded to, because he only lets out emotions later when she's leaving, is the only time he really starts to talk about himself and his family and lets her in it all. But in that scene, had it been touched on, because he jokes about what's difficult for men, but had it been a little more truth-telling in why men have to put up certain faces and fronts.
Yeah, but that's not what he's in the business of doing.
That's not him.
That's not him. That's not his character. So I don't know if that would really fit.
No, it might not have worked.
I do want to talk about Basinger's treatment on the set.
Mm-hmm. And this is part of production notes, so go for it.
I know. So the big thing was that Lynn basically said to both actors, don't have any contact besides what's on the set, besides what is being filmed. Also, simultaneously, the filming was done in order. So at the very beginning,
very rare, very expensive.
Yeah, but this is exactly what he wanted to do, right? Because these are the reasons why. Because at the very beginning, Rourke's character is courting the shit out of her, right? And like, you're great, you're wonderful, all of this. And then there's a shift, right? There's a power shift. Mm-hmm. And literally that power shift, if Lynn didn't feel like he was getting enough, he would tell Rourke to treat Basinger in a specific way or do something to her in order to evoke that reaction.
And off to the side so she couldn't hear.
Right.
Either.
Yeah. So like it might have been like slapping her, or it might have been like, I think one scene they were twisting her arm specifically to actually make her cry, to evoke the scene and the emotion out of her, which is very interesting. So there's an interview, and we'll put it up on the website, where Kim Basinger actually talks about this and what she went through. But at the end of it, she says, I'm glad I did it because this actually taught me how to act. The only thing I wish is that I wish he would have given me the notes first, and then allowed and see what I could do before we went to like different extremes. But she's not mad about it at all, which I would be fucking furious if that was me.
Sounds like Sansa saying, hey, my abuse is what made me, and that has its own problems.
I mean, it does have its own problems, but I'm saying that she says that this is literally when she learned how to act. Like that this movie is what really propelled her into greatness in a very odd way. And the unorthodoxness would never fly like that today. Mm-mm. Never, ever, ever, never.
No.
So I wonder about it. I question it.
Which is why she owns all that footage, and none of it's going to see the light of day, because it shows a lot of the sort of psychological abuse, really, that was going on the set to provoke a certain reaction. The only thing that really...
I mean, but it's so wait. All right, so I'm going to be the devil's advocate here, because I'm not, remotely connected to Hollywood. I've never been connected to Hollywood in any type, way, shape, or form. Not really. Isn't this also part of method acting, technically? Aren't you supposed to stay in character? Like, if I want to play the devil's advocate, right, isn't this sort of what you sort of do? You can't sometimes really... And I know some actors really go to the full extent of this. Like, if you're not supposed to like somebody, you're not supposed to like somebody. If you're supposed to treat them like dirt, then you treat them like dirt. If you're playing this cold, callous man who doesn't really care about what your feelings are, but wants to provoke a sexual response from you, then wouldn't you be playing that person in life if you're method acting it?
Yes, but usually you impose that on yourself, and you create that environment for yourself as the method actor. And in this case, it seems like she was not really privy to how they were setting this up and how it was being structured to break her down. And so because I think at one point there's an interview, where Lynn says, you couldn't do this with everyone. Kim is a bit like a child. She's an innocent. That's part of her appeal. She's an instinctive actress. She was that woman for 10 weeks. She didn't act as that woman. In order for her to be angry, I would rage at her and she'd rage back at me. Mickey had to do it too. He would frighten her, and it was done purposely. She's not an intellectual. She doesn't read books. She doesn't actually act. She reacts, and she had to plumb the depths in this movie. So basically, it sounds like they didn't create this environment together. It was put upon her and broke her down, and that's why they filmed it actually chronologically, was so that you could see her progression into a little bit of madness. And again, she never said, stop the filming, I'm going to get out of here. She says she wanted to, but she didn't. And so she could have quit the film at any point, but didn't do it. So yes, it's not like she was locked in a trailer and forced to act, but it wasn't, I think, a full choice in terms of what a method actor would typically do.
Right. I guess the good part is that they've seen each other since then, and her and Mickey Rourke are completely fine. Mm-hmm. They're good. Or it seems like they're good anyway. Like they're posing together in pictures and smiling and catching up and having a grand old fucking time. So that's the good part, I guess, out of all of that, is that at least it did not leave. And she really feels like it was a good thing for her. So that's the
certainly made her career, even if she had problems with her marriage while it was being filmed, apparently.
Well, I'm sure it would. Just in general, if you're in, I don't know, that whole scene and that whole set had to be intense. That entire way of being and the way of being possessed and being looked at and being objectified would play on anybody's brain, I would think.
Lynn called it emotional engineering, what they were doing.
Because it is. I mean, it's beyond intense to feel like you are being broken down. It's beyond intense. And that is part of what you're doing in a BDSM relationship. You're breaking a person down, literally, so they can feel pleasure. Mm-hmm. It's not for me.
And you know that, and that's what's important.
Yes, and I do know that, and you know that, so that is also important.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Well, so couple of production notes to give was that, sorry guys, that was a body double, was not Kim Basinger's body through pretty much the whole film. So,
but it was Mickey Rourke's body.
Yeah, they didn't show much of it, though. I think today they would show a lot more. Audiences would want to see a lot more, and it's more acceptable. So, yeah, they would have seen his nipples caressed with ice as well as hers. He had to lose 30 pounds for the role, though.
Yep.
I actually really thought this was interesting, that one of the people that really, really wanted the role was Terry Garr. And I love Terry Garr. I cannot picture her in this role at all, but she apparently really lobbied for it. And Kathleen Turner was an early choice for the role as well. I can't picture it.
She's too strong.
Yeah.
She's too strong.
Yeah. Isabella Rossellini, maybe, but I really do think that Kim Basinger was the correct choice for it. So
she is. She actually is. All right, now to soundtrack smashes. So just FYI, you'll probably get this vinyl for $20 or under if you're so inclined. I think there are a couple of audio cassettes rolling around. And the soundtrack was sort of filled with a who's who a little bit. Like, so you had Devo, and you had your Rhythmics on there, and then you had John Taylor of Duran Duran on there. Not that I, particularly love that song at all, but yeah, you had a couple of different people on there.
Yeah, if you want a generic 80s sexy night, break out the hairspray and some candles and this soundtrack. Just don't get the hairspray too close to the candles. For 80s hair.
Oh, jeez.
No, there wasn't too much 80s hair going on in this movie, so.
No, not really. Not at all.
Surprising for New York in the 80s. There was no working girl style hair, but they were from Jersey, weren't they?
Everyone had 80s hair. Yeah. So, what was your big soundtrack smash?
You know, I had to work my way through this one, and I was liking The Best Is Yet to Come.
There's nothing you can do about it.
It was trying to be sort of 80s sultry, and then it just slid into silliness.
I've always been an optimistic one.
And Slave to Love had an interesting video with an interracial dance that was pretty cool. The Stuart Copeland Can sounded a lot like the Rain Man soundtrack. It has sort of the same things going on in it. And the Eurythmics are always cool. And the Luba Let It Go.
Let it go, let it free your body, let it move your soul. Let it go.
Started to sound like Isla Bonita, which I guess came earlier. So
which did you pick?
We just really needed some Tim Capello.
No.
Sexy
Which
Sax Man in
I
here.
definitely didn't need any sax man. Which one did you pick?
You know, I think I'm going with Bread and Butter by Devo.
Really? That's your soundtrack smash?
Actually, you know what? My real one is going to be You Can Leave Your Hat On by Joe Cocker.
You can leave your hat on.
Because not only
Really, the strip
is
scene
that
one?
well, because the striptease is sort of silly and fun, and to me that made it accessible. Like, she's still a little embarrassed to do this, but she's having fun with it, and they both are. And to me, it was almost the most real scene of a couple in a relationship in the film, because they're just goofing around and having fun while being a bit sexy about it. So that I liked, and I also feel like now I really understand that song being in the full Monty, and I did not until I saw this.
All right, that's fair.
So now I get it.
All right,
in
that's
fact,
fair.
a lot of the full Monty was funnier now.
Right, that's fair. I picked The City Never Sleeps by the Eurythmics.
Eurythmics always.
You know there's so many people living in this house.
Yeah, and it is just so this song really shows me where Everything But the Girl was truly influenced by, especially for their albums for Walking Wounded and Temperamental.
And do you like being single?
The mainlining, the streaming of it, the idea of it, the concept of walking a city street and talking about it and where are you going and what are you doing.
And the song is very atmospheric.
Yes.
And it doesn't follow the rules of songs of that era.
Correct.
In a lot of ways. It's much more 90s in its sound, where
Yes.
it's ambient.
Yeah, it's extremely progressive and it's wonderful, and that's why I love it. Nothing relating to the film. Although it does give you your two most poignant scenes, I feel like. It gives you the scene, the ice scene. Oh, no, the blindfold scene, which I don't know if ice play was involved in it.
And he does
Blindfold.
politely ask to blindfold her. We didn't talk about that, but he does say,
That's
"Can
what I'm
I
saying.
blindfold
He
you?"
generally asks. So that's why I think that other one scene is bad, because I'm sure there was something there. So yeah, The City Never Sleeps by the Eurythmics. Definitely. It also was part of the blindfold scene and the masturbation scene, which you should really never masturbate at work. That is a bad idea.
And then she's wearing different clothes when she leaves, so I guess she keeps a change of clothes just in case.
New York, you definitely always keep a
No,
change of
that's
clothes.
true, yeah.
That's New York.
Yeah, you might get caught in the rain or snow or
Something.
having sex
I mean,
or
I
whatever.
have a change of clothes in my car generally, or at least I have like 2 pieces of clothing. I definitely have a change of shoes.
Yeah,
You just never know.
yeah.
No one break into my car now. You don't want my shoes or my cover up.
She doesn't keep the good shoes in the car.
No, I don't. This is true. So yeah, that's what I've got for soundtrack smashes.
Yeah, like I said, it had some real standouts.
Oh, did
but
you want to talk about Billie Holiday at all?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I really feel like this the real misstep in the film, and I feel like somebody didn't understand what the song was.
So, yeah, I think what they realized is they wanted something sexy and sultry for a very specific piece, sort of like an anthem, and people always go back to jazz, right? And I think jazz is a great place. But sadly, what jazz does a lot of the time is it tells a story. And 9 times out of 10, I feel like in jazz, that story is not a happy story.
Right, it's like country music.
You're funny. That story is not a happy story. That story is generally a story of despair or poverty or something, right? Or it's a wanting. It's generally not a happy story. So in the case of Billie Holiday's Strange Fruits, it is not a happy story. Perry, would you like to tell us what it's about?
Yes. Strange Fruit is about lynching.
Correct. It was a poem written about lynching, and Billie Holiday sang the poem, and it was very obvious about what it was about.
Yes.
And then they're using this as a sexy, sultry precursor.
An additional history on that is, this was in the late 30s when she was originally singing that song, and so this is way before the movements of the 60s. And so she was being very revolutionary in doing this, and she would always close the show. The waiters were to stop serving. The room was to be dark with a spotlight just on her face, and she would close the show and there would be no encore, so that it left the largest possible impact. And this song actually probably led directly to her death because an asshole named Harry Anslinger was the first commissioner of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics and was exceedingly racist, even for his time. And he claimed that jazz music was satanic and it was written by people under the influence of marijuana. And so he made sure that Billie Holiday, who did have a drug addiction, was followed and was caught buying heroin. And she spent 18 months in prison, and then she went into rehab, and he made sure that she did not get the help she needed while in rehab. Well, first made sure she couldn't play in venues that served alcohol. Her license was not renewed to do so. Cabaret license, I think it was. And after that, she was in rehab. He made sure that all of the gifts and everything that were brought to her were taken away, that she didn't get methadone treatments, and she eventually died. And basically it was because he thought this song was subversive to, he said it made black people forget their place. And so, so this song, highly inappropriate for a scene where he's about to try and have sex.
Yep. So I would love to tell you this is probably the only misstep regarding soundtracks, but I highly doubt it.
I just feel like someone listened to it and went, hey, this sounds cool, and just really did. There was no internet, but this was a very well-known jazz song. It's not like you couldn't go and do some research and find out, the lyrics to the song and maybe have a little better understanding.
It's not like you could hear the lyrics of the song. You hear the lyrics, it's very apparent.
The bulging eyes and the twisted mouth.
Yeah. It's not all just subtext.
I mean, you think they were talking about a subtext in terms of, your own or a path to self-destruction or self-destruction on the hands of somebody else? That would be beyond deep if they really tried to parallel it, and I don't really think you should parallel it.
And if they tried, again, this is a couple of white people,
I don't think
wealthy white people who are in no danger of being lynched. I think it's just a very poor choice.
It's a poor choice. Yeah.
The rest of the music is fine, but that one in particular is just not good.
Okay.
But it's an amazing song, and if you've never heard it, we'll put it on the site.
There you go. So cultural impact, I kind of want to talk about this a little bit, just because Adrian Lyne, love him, hate him, love this film, hate this film. I don't know what to tell you, man. There's like about 200 different references to things that it's been in. If you love any part of 50 Shades, it is shades of 9.5 Weeks all over it. It is stamped
Deeply.
all over it in the books, in the movies, in, the ice cream scene in the refrigerator, to
Hot Shots made much more sense after I saw it.
you're funny, to like the shopping scenes. It's literally all over, like that whole 50 Shades, the trilogy. It's a trilogy.
And Kim Basinger is actually in 50 Shades Darker.
So she is. So she plays a Christian Grey, so the guy who's really into BDSMs.
Mm-hmm.
She plays his lover who got him into BDSM, which then ergo makes sense, right? So the student has now become the teacher, and then the student is now teaching somebody else. So it actually made a lot of sense, even though her part was pretty small, but it was kind of her way of saying, hey, I'm cool with all of this, you guys. Like, here's how it might have evolved in my life. It's all right. It's good. Like, I'm at peace with it and I'm good with it.
Yeah.
So there's that.
Yeah, you could even infer that it was even potentially the same character. Although, do they give her a name in the film? I don't know.
Yeah, Elena Lincoln.
Oh, wow, no then.
No, but you could almost infer like this could have been this person. Yeah, totally. So do you think you're better off having watched this movie?
Definitely. I wasn't so sure at first because, like I said, I'm not generally left disliking something in a vague way. If I really dislike something, it's like, oh, this is such garbage. But I didn't feel that way about it. I just didn't really enjoy it. And I like films that have a lot to say and have a lot of subtext and are, what would be considered an art house film. But there was something just that didn't feel right about it to me. And I still, as I said before, I do not love the overall construction of it.
Well, I think they had to heavily edit it so much.
The first cut was 5 hours.
Yeah, I think it's just so edited that I don't think there are places where you feel it's disjointed.
Mm-hmm. And then some scenes are just, like I said before, some things just don't make sense to me. But as you said, so many things reference it. And its place in film history is important in that it was able to put a message out there about a different type of sexual lifestyle and say that it was okay. That this is not deviant, this is not bad. That this is okay as long as two consenting adults enjoy this, it's great. And I think that those are the kind of messages that help us grow as a people. It helps us all to evolve and grow emotionally. And so I think that pushing those boundaries is important even when it upsets people. It is its reason for being.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
That's very fair. I just figured, so I didn't even think we got into this. Like, I don't think I saw this until my 20s.
Mm-hmm.
I was 10 or I was like 9 at the time of its release. I didn't really see this for a very long time. I want to say well into my 20s, but sort of like oh shit, right, there was this movie and there was such a big deal about it. And yeah, all these food scenes. And then watching it a couple of days ago, I was like, have I ever really seen this whole movie? And I don't think that I had. I think that I'd always just seen snips or clips or, turned on the television and it maybe came on as part of it. But at least I knew the overarching themes of it. And I think the reality is that we are, I don't want to say over-sexualized, we have become more open to different sexual relationships and relationships in general, and just having conversations about different relationships and what they look like and how they might be in a very non-judgmental way, and trying to understand. And I also felt like it left me still wondering. So I thought it would probably do the same for you. It sort of gets into your brain a bit.
I think it also makes you think about what is at the core of our wants and needs as humans, especially with a scene that didn't make a lot of sense to me at first, but it's where she goes to see Farnsworth, the artist whose show they're going to be opening at the gallery, and he's not to be found. He's taken his phone off the hook, and so she goes up into the mountains. I don't remember where he is, but she goes up to see him, and it's pristine. It's beautiful woods and lake, and he's fishing, and he's got a fish in his hands. And she says, do you remember your show is in a few days? And he says, when I'm hungry, I remember to eat, and when I'm tired, I remember to sleep. And it kind of seems like he's talking about those very simple needs and wants and pleasures even. And there's even deeper symbolism if you want to look at the fish as like she's a fish out of water in what she's doing. And then, but later on, he's at the opening for the gallery, and it's sort of this decadent 80s opening, and he just looks very uncomfortable and out of place there, showing that all of these other things are not necessary, that it's almost like it's a perversion around his work, and because it's so simple and it's at the core of his emotions. And she's visibly upset at the party, and I just didn't register, but I feel like they were trying to say there that sometimes you have to understand yourself and what you really need in order to make those decisions that are good for you. And in that case, like he made the decision to remove himself. He was living out there to create his art. And that's right when she makes the decision to remove herself from John Gray. So I feel like those kinds of messages are important and interesting. And so, I really appreciated that kind of insight had been put into it.
Great. So I think that's it for us. Do you have anything else? I think I'm good.
Only that I would say go into it knowing what to expect. It's a lot more tame than you think by today's standards, because it's been played up in our minds as being, super X-rated, you're going to lose your mind, kind of the same reaction to people had to Last Tango in Paris in the 70s and to, I don't know, what was it, Wild Orchid in the 90s or things like that, where people just were like, oh my God, it's the end of Western civilization. It's
Wild Orchid, another Mickey Rourke hotness.
Right. And so it is actually extremely tame by today's standards, but go into it knowing it's a bit uneven and it's a bit just odd at times, but that there is value, I feel, in having seen it. Not for everybody, though. There are going to be some people who are going to be like, you are a fucking moron. I wasted 2 hours on this, you asshole.
I don't think I haven't gotten that reaction at all. I haven't gotten that at all.
Yeah.
At all.
How many people have you showed this to?
No, I mean, just in general, like in reading the reviews and everything else, like I don't think anybody ever walks out of it like, what the fuck did I just watch?
Well,
I don't mean like that was a waste of time. They might be like, what the hell did I just watch? But it's not like so awful. It's just sort of like it plays on your brain a bit.
Yeah, and it has a very, very small role by Christine Baranski in it. So she's always worth watching, especially when she's just balancing a spoon on her nose.
You're hysterical. All right, so thank you so much for tuning in. Please rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast, wherever you're getting your podcasts.
Your favorite podcatcher. Although we are definitely on Spotify, iHeartRadio, iTunes.
Well, actually, it's not iTunes. It's Apple Podcasts.
Yes, that's right. It has changed.
And check out our website, youhaven'tseenwhatmovie.com, as well as social media, Insta, Facebook, Twitter, You Haven't Seen What Movie. And drop us a line. Feel free to reach out and touch somebody, just not physically.
Without consent.
Without consent, exactly. Feel free to drop us a line and let us know what you think or what we should be talking about next.
And hey, we want to say thank you to all the new listeners out there. It looks like we've had some new people pick up in like England and France, and that's pretty awesome.
Yep. And thank you for always listening to my cat herding. I really appreciate you.
Oh, and Spain.
Yes. Australia, South Africa, Brazil. Yeah. So thanks all of you. And those of you listening in the States, of course.
Yes.
Yep. I think we need some Maine folks on board. And that would be good.
Yeah, Maine is currently missing on our state map.
Maine and Montana. So just in case, somebody in those states who you think will enjoy this. Until then,
be kind.
Rewind. Bye.
Bye. My computer crashed. I don't even have anything good to say at the end this time.
Praise Jesus.
I don't even have a Max Dugan joke.
Yeah. Everybody wins.
I think he was one of the guys in the trench coats at the Times Square sex shop.
Maybe that was your grandpa.
Oh.
You're welcome.
I love you.
Aren't you gonna ask me how I like this?